We are familiar with the 4% rule as a guide for successful 30-year withdrawal strategy. Is there a similar guide for, say, a 75-year-old wanting to reset a withdrawal based on current retirement assets, or even on ongoing guidance using guardrail principles as we age and assets change?
All right. Yeah, that's a great question. It gets at the heart of a lot of the things related to spending from investments in retirement. Right. The 4% rule, as originally conceived, was designed for a 30-year long retirement because it's only the withdrawal rate you use in the first year of retirement. Then you adjust your spending in future years for inflation, but you don't really worry about the withdrawal rate that represents from what's left in the portfolio. If your portfolio is growing after the start of retirement, your current withdrawal rate might go down. If your portfolio is shrinking after the start of retirement, your current withdrawal rate may go up. But the 4% rule is an example of a constant inflation adjusted spending strategy where it's based on spending amounts and it's not based on withdrawal rates. So that being said, we do hear these questions along these lines quite a bit about, well, the 4% rule is designed for 30 years. Suppose I'm, in this case, 75 years old. Do I need to be using a 4% withdrawal rate? Well, not necessarily. So let's dive into that a little bit. If you maybe one starting point for that is like if you're following the basic logic of the 4% rule in terms of no investment fees, no taxes, what's the highest initial withdrawal rate you could use in retirement for a specified time horizon. Again, we mentioned the 4% rule was designed for 30 years, but just with the same historical data Bill Bengen used to create that 4% rule. Here's a few guidelines on simple rules of thumb. If you have a 10-year retirement, 8% was that historical, approximately speaking, safe withdrawal rate. Over a 15-year retirement, 6% withdrawal rate. Over a 20-year retirement, 5% withdrawal rate. 30 years gave us 4%. And if your time horizon is like just ongoing 40, 50 plus years, it looks like the term asymptote, the safe withdrawal rate seems to converge around 3.5%. With that methodology Bill Bengen used to create the 4% rule. So if you're 75, 30 years would be age 105. If you think you don't have to plan for a 30-year retirement at that point, yeah, you could be talking about a higher withdrawal rate. Whether if it's 20 years, again, that would calibrate to a 5% initial withdrawal rate. And so that's the conversation in terms of like Bill Bengen's style, constant inflation adjusted spending. We do also have to reflect on any sort of flexibility to adjust spending. So using a variable spending strategy, and that's the question asked about guardrails. So we'll get into that a little bit. That helps manage the sequence of returns risk. In a way, the 4% rule logic maximizes sequence of returns risk because it assumes you're using an aggressive investment portfolio, volatile investment portfolio, but you're never adjusting spending based on portfolio performance. If you're willing to cut spending a little bit after markets go down, you can use a higher initial withdrawal rate. And so the exact opposite of the 4% rule would be a constant percentage strategy. That's where you spend a percentage of what's left from the portfolio each year. And that really helps to alleviate the sequence of returns risk. Because if the market's down, your portfolio's down, your spending goes down. You're not selling as much at a loss. And you can potentially have a better opportunity to recover from that. So to analyze those kinds of rules, I talk about the pay rule as a way to consider different spending strategies calibrated to the same downside risk. With the Retirement Researcher Academy, we do have a pay rule calculator available that we're currently making significant updates and revisions to make it better aligned with how I talk about the pay rule in my retirement planning guidebook. I'll do a workshop on that in July where we'll go through all the different spending strategies. But ultimately, you've got, when we talk about guardrails, and the way it's going to work in the payroll calculator, there's really three broad guardrail or variable spending strategy type approaches that you might consider. And the guardrails are just putting some sort of control over maybe starting back a moment. So constant inflation adjusted spending, the benefit is, you know how much you can spend every year. The disadvantage is it amplifies sequence risk, and you may run out of money and then you can't spend anything. But otherwise, as long as you have money left, you can spend something. Constant percentage is at the other extreme. You'll never run out of money with a constant percentage strategy, but your spending might be quite volatile because it's fluctuating with your portfolio performance. So guardrails, or any kind of rule variable spending strategy, is trying to strike some sort of balance between those two. You want to adjust spending to help manage sequence risk, but you don't want to adjust it too much. You want to have some sort of control over how much those spending fluctuations would be. So with the payroll calculator, just the way we envision looking at that, you can have constant amount strategies. These are cousins of the 4% rule, but they're going to put some sort of guardrails around how much the percentage of the remaining portfolio can fluctuate. So, or it could just be, in certain situations, I don't take the inflation adjustment, but I'll spend a constant inflation adjusted amount every year, but say subject to, I won't ever spend more than 8% of what's left. And that would be, I'd reduce spending when my portfolio starts to decline. Or I might say, if my portfolio keeps growing, I want to spend more. I'll spend at least 3% of what's left in my portfolio. So if my portfolio grows significantly, I'll start spending more. That would be putting guardrails around a constant amount. Then you have constant percentage type strategies, but you can put dollar guardrails around that. So you could say, well, I'll spend 5% of what's left every year, but I'll never spend more than $100,000 in a year, or I'll never spend less than $50,000 in a year. Whatever the case may be, you're putting guardrails around the constant percentage strategy. And our payroll calculator will let you analyze those types of strategies. And then the third one would be the actuarial methods. And that's going to be related to constant percentages, but the percentage isn't constant. It increases with age as your subsequent time horizon gets shorter, kind of like what we talked about at the start of this question. With shorter time horizons, you can use a higher withdrawal rate because the money doesn't need to last for as long at that point. Now, the RMD rates published by the IRS for required minimum distributions are a guideline around that. And at age 75, the RMD rate is 4.1%. Now, generally, that's viewed as pretty conservative because with the RMD rules, you're really assuming investments don't earn any return. And you're also assuming it's a couple and one spouse is 10 years younger than the other spouse. So you might increase above RMD rates to be a little bit more aggressive with your spending. In the most recent edition of the Retirement Planning Guidebook, I talked about taking those RMD rates and multiplying them all by 1.65 as a case study where that would calibrate some of the downside risk with other spending strategies. And with that, it would be a 75-year-old would be looking at a 6.7% withdrawal rate. So to summarize all that, 4% rules identified for 30 years. If your time horizon is shorter, you could increase above that. And also if you're willing to be flexible with your spending so that you can help reduce some of that sequence of returns risk, you could use a higher distribution rate as well.